see if it works. Never actually tried using this. They have a new media board section. I'm gonna try it out. So we are live on YouTube, I think. It's black. It says live. There we go. Let's check it out. That was weird. I think that worked. First time I ever tried this thing. What's going on? Maybe it's not really working too well. Let's try one more time. That's really weird. First time trying this thing out. Just want to see if it works okay. Seems it's not working very good right now. Let's just cut it. Okay. Let's start. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, allenwyma, and today I have Maikha Abarca, hope I said that correctly, on the show. She's here to talk to us about how to use Unity and Flutter together, right? So a lot of people are actually interested in making video games and using Flutter to do that. And yeah, I think it's good to hear from her side what she thinks, because there's more than one solution out there. And she went ahead and went with Unity, so it'd be good to hear kind of, what you thought about that. I think the first thing is let's go ahead and let's kind of let you introduce yourself, talk about, who you are. So go ahead.
I'm a software developer, depending on what you want or what you like. I was born in Peru in South America. I lived in around 6-7 years, and I'm currently living in Europe. I was a designer, and then I moved to coding, and I work for startups mostly, and I'm really enjoying it, so I want to keep on doing it. Working with Flutter particularly as well, yeah.
Pretty interesting, because not a lot of people come from design and go to coding, right? I think people want to do that, but I don't hear a lot of success stories. It seems like you really have a success story. Like, what was the idea that made you want to change from design to coding?
So when I started digital media, I created websites. So I was like a webmaster, right? So I created, they were mostly static websites. And I had to copy and paste some JavaScript and edit some HTML. And that's when I started realizing coding. But then it was later decided to join a coding bootcamp. And I just fell in love with programming. My first programming language was Ruby. And from then on, I just continued coding.
Okay, which coding bootcamp did you go to?
It's called Ironhack, and I bootcamp in Barcelona, in Spain.
Was it expensive? Did you have to take out a loan or anything to make that happen?
I don't remember the price, but yeah, they gave us loans, and it was like you had to pay only a fair amount of money each month. So it was kind of easier rather than paying it all at the same time, right? I think it was a degrees in. I don't remember exactly the price though, but yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Like, I always hear about coding bootcamp, but I think it's more popular now than what it used to be. I'm kind of on the not go to coding bootcamp, but we had a guest on previously who really promoted coding bootcamps, but he was definitely similar thinking in me, in the fact that coding bootcamps, so yeah, you can do it, but it's not like, okay, you go to it, you do it, you pay your money, and you're done, you get a job. It's like you have to really bust your ass basically to make it happen, right? It's like you have to really put the effort in. Out here, there's a coding bootcamp, and there's a couple of them, but there's one in particular where my impression is most of the people, it's like they just kind of go through the steps. They do it, and then they come for an interview, and I ask them simple questions like, what's this, what's that, and they're unable to answer that, right? They say okay, I say, okay, what is this line about encrypting a password? What does this do? They can't even answer that. I mean, I hope that, I understand that the time, right, it's very crunched, but do you think that when you went through this yourself that you were a part of kind of that style, or were you really spending quite a lot of time understanding every single concept, or How was your kind of style?
I think that the difference between camps and other type of education, systems engineer when I was at uni, so I don't really have experience full career as a software engineer, but I've interviewed people who came fresh grads, right? So I think when we were trying to select people was the pragmatic approach and the ability to be able to actually create what we create. It's true that when you are in a coding bootcamp, you do everything really fast and you learn in a really short period of time, but the that are super practical. Like I learned about TDD when I was in the coding bootcamp, and that's people hadn't really heard of. And even if you be working as software engineer or developer, sometimes you are not familiar with those subjects, or you don't even know properly, right? So that was one of the things that I learned in a coding bootcamp. So I think there are definitely advantages and disadvantages, and the disadvantage learning more about the theory, which is something that you have to put effort into if you really want to learn more about software engineering and computer science in general. And data structures, those things you don't learn in a coding bootcamp. At least I didn't. Maybe you do now, but I didn't. And I had to learn about that. To, have a clear grasp of what I was talking about when I was talking about creating software.
I think for me, my algorithms and data structures is kind of weak, but I kind of learn as I need to, right? So I think I talked to you before. I mean, so we met a long time ago. To kind of give some audience a background, is that you were in Shenzhen, I think. I was in Hong Kong. You came to Hong Kong to put on a creative coding meetup. We can talk a little bit about what is creative coding a little bit later on. And I would think I talked to you a little bit about Elixir, right? And for that one, like understanding like what's a list, and then like a list in uh, Elixir is actually a single linked list, and like a tuple is different, and even tuple, of course, in like Python, etc. And so it's good to understand like if you are using a list, that actually finding the last element is very, very slow as opposed to like a regular like Python list or an array in Ruby, right? Getting the last element of array in Ruby, right? Just dot last. It's pretty easy. But in a single linked list, I think you know what a single linked list is, right? It takes a long time to get to the end. So that's something that I think is that I can pick up. But like if you ask me like how to do bubble sort, oh man, I forgot. It's been years since I took university, so I couldn't implement a bubble sort to save my life. But yeah, like remember I told you about the coding bootcamp guy, right? He was actually talking about algorithms and data structures and how you should really get into those, and those would really what do you call that? Improve your career.
Yeah.
Were you actually going to say something? I felt like I cut you off.
No, I think that for me, that particular understand how data is processed, and that helps me in general. Like, but there are so many things that you have to learn when you're talking, right? It's like a huge universe of things. Most senior support engineers that I know that I really admire say that they cannot really grasp them, right? So that's why we tend to specialize in the, and also depends on your personality of the things you're interested in to do and you want to learn. Like another area that I'm passionate about is, right? There was a time when I worked for a software consultancy that's called ThoughtWorks. And a lot about how to approach software development from an agile perspective, and I think that's probably one of the skills that was the most useful for me now in my career. Yeah, so there are 8 weeks in a coding bootcamp, but first step, because at least you realize it out and you really want to continue going down that path. And because the engineers at the moment, there are companies that are willing to hiring junior people so they can grow in their teams, right? They can learn their coding practices and they can become part quite fast. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to do if you are interested in. But definitely, it's not like you that once you finish, you are going to be super expert and then it's going to be super easy to continue a career to start a career as a software engineer. It's not like that. You have to put a lot of effort into it. But it's an option, and it's a good option, I would say.
To a question, what I am thinking about right now is what actually helped me a lot is actually having a mentor, right? Did you ever have a mentor yourself?
Yes, yes, I had mentors. When I was at SolidWorks, that was the moment when I had mentors that were close to me. And it was definitely very useful. Like getting feedback from people who have a clear understanding of what you are trying to learn is really, yeah, I think that's helpful for sure.
User who's actually live chatting with us right now, and he's asking his question is, why is it so hard to find a mentor? Do you have any tips for maybe how to find a good mentor?
I don't really have tips. It's important to try to go to places people, right? Like meetups and things like that. Those places where you probably find a person who aligns with you in terms of like your and values, and that's the important connection. If you do that, then you're gonna have a friend, and then you're gonna have somebody who's gonna help you grow. So I've had those experiences in the past, and I actually ended up working with those people in their organizations. So yeah, I would say just try to meet people and try to find people who you actually like, because if you are going people like to
I think that's a good start too. I know for me, it's like you have to find somebody who's kind of like in the space or like in the direction where you want to go, right? Then they can definitely help you out. Like for me, I wanted to go into like the CTO kind of style. And so I found a guy who was a CTO, and I just said, hey, can you help to mentor me? I want to grow into this path, and I think that the path that you're on right now is the path I want to go to. And I was quite surprised that he was just say, yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, you never know until you ask, right?
yeah, of course.
Okay, so I'd love to hear more about like your journey, right? So you took the coding boot camp, and then like, did they help you to find a job, or did you find it on your own? Like, what happened?
There were options in the bootcamp interview, but I actually did what I just told you. I went to meetups and I met somebody who I really admired, in the sense that I thought he was a very good professional, and we ended up being friends, and I ended up working in his organization. So that's how I found my first software engineering, well, my first job after the bootcamp.
Okay, so what was it exactly that you were doing?
Had to do with organized technical integration. Not working as a full-time, but I was helping the engineering team work with the clients so they could integrate our software product to their websites. So it was the product was something similar to what's Klarna, that gives you instant credit when you want to do some online shopping. And so yeah, that was what I was doing. I also helped writing some technical documentation and things like that, because I had a designer background. My first jobs in the industry were something in between designer and developer, but then later in 2017 I started working as a full-time developer.
Okay, you still with us? Okay, I think the live stream connection is a little bit choppy on your end because I'm kind of losing you a bit. I think the next question I want to get into, yeah. It's like you're lagging a little bit according to my producer. It's like you're lagging a little bit according to my producer. Your connection's not so good.
Okay.
I think the next question I want to ask is like, it's okay. I think the next question I want to ask is like, when did you start getting into Flutter and why?
I started getting Flutter at the end of 2018. I was still working at ThoughtWorks, and one of my colleagues introduced me to Flutter. We were working in a mobile application. It was enterprise software, so it was huge. And because we were in mobile development at the time, they were exploring Flutter, and that's when I learned about it. And then I liked it. I started learning more about it, and I got my first freelance job in 2019. Yeah, so 2019 officially, let's say.
Impressions, right? Because I think I seen we asked you like what kind of things you were doing before, and you were definitely doing stuff, and it looks like you could do stuff in the mobile space, right? Swift. Sorry, I lost where you wrote it down, but you did Swift, Kotlin, and Java, I believe. Yeah, Java, Kotlin, and Biz Swift, right? So I think you must have already had a background in kind of mobile development, right? So kind of like, what was your impression?
Yeah, in that mobile team we were working. Yeah, in that team we were doing some development in Kotlin. I did Swift just a tiny bit, and Kotlin, and yeah, for enterprise support. So there were many different aspects that we had to take care of that were part of the application. But then when I started working with Flutter, I just didn't go back to any of the native. I've been working with Flutter since 2019 until now.
Okay, so what was your thoughts about Flutter at the time?
I really liked the fact that you could create UI in a declarative way, and that was fast. And I saw the potential. I saw that it could be used for like small teams, for startups, for example, like because for this consultancy I used to work. And I really like the startup world. I like when people come with ideas. Be used for many of these projects, and that's what's actually happening. So now I'm working on startups and using Flutter. So yeah, it's really versatile. I mean, you don't really compromise performance. That's the reason why we're here, right?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I use Flutter, I can build like anything that I want. I never really had a problem where it's like, oh, I don't think I can do that. Like there was a couple of times where like I couldn't get things to work properly on different screen sizes, but I think in general, it's never been something where it's like, well, I don't know how to make something like this. The nice part is that there's so many like plugins in the community that you could just use, right?
Yeah, one of the cool things as well is because I have a designer background. In Flutter that have to do with material design, right? So it was like perfect for me because I could see that use those different components in ways that were more effective when you were talking about creating the application. So yeah, I think I heard about the designer developer idea that it's around that has to do with creating products that are with Flutter, and I think I kind of fit or in that box somehow because I'm a designer. trying to pay more attention to software engineer since 2017. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting, right? Because if you're coming from a design background and the way Flutter works is like, if you're a designer, and again, it's kind of my experience is that designers are actually able to really create whatever they want once they kind of start grasping things. Like, did you find like you had the same thing where it's like, okay, you have your design background and you can really do whatever you really want to do?
Exactly. It's powerful because you have all the tools, right? I have created a startup now as well. Yeah. Tell you more about it if you want.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you can definitely start telling us right now because that's interesting. So, is it because of Flutter that you feel that you could make this startup, or what can you say about it?
Saying that I got first freelance job in 2019 project. The person who then hired me application that is now our startup. So we became friends, and then founder, and we just presented the World Congress in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago. I went there to do a pitch and stuff. So it's evolved fast. And I actually started with Flutter, like I took it seriously because of this project, because she had the idea of like creating this mobile app, and she wanted me to do it. And I thought Flutter would be a good option, right? Just by myself to have to create an application that works for iOS. I said yes, and that's when I started taking Flutter. And the project is evolving. We have just hired a freelance guy to help us with the time to do both job and the startup. So yeah, it's going well. So Flutter gives you many options. If you have ideas, you can just put anything.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I don't know why, but right now I keep wanting to ask you if you have any things that Flutter is not good for in your findings, right? Because putting a whole company onto a single technology like this is definitely something where you have to really believe in, right? There must be something which didn't quite work, right? And it sounds like you're shaking your head, so I'm guessing there must be something.
I don't want to sound like a person who is a solution for everything. Yeah, it's good if you want to create a project that well defined in the sense that you have an idea of want to go. Expect that you have to a lot of code specific of the problems with Flutter, like because it's a framework that's created applications that have to do with iOS and Android, right? There are certain you have to, if you, for example, make your application work in the background in Android, right? The application I was just telling you about is an application that broadcasts audio, and it has to do it even if the app is in the background. So in order to do that, you have to communicate with the OS of the device itself, and to do that, you have to write native code, right? So if you're a new developer, somebody who's learning, because Flutter attracts a lot of people who are, and you have a project in mind, you have a cool idea, the need that your project might have of using code, and that's what you're probably going to have. Apart, if you are a big organization that has lots of budget and lots of resources, why don't go native, right? Depending on the needs of the project, the reach of the project, you have technology is good for you. Many different factors you have to consider. I like Flutter for like when you have ideas that you are a small organization, you and your friend, like me and my friend, and want to create something together for startups, for prototypes, and they are very serious professional. Of them system here in London that started are still Flutter, and but they have like a team of engineers, all ages, like and things like that, right? So it depends on the project, and you might have some issues to frames in case you want something like a platter, want to draw something on top, because if you compromising performance because you draw the screen basically. Right? This is another area where you have to be careful. Another area that you have to consider is like for web, for example, SEO. That is not ideal, or may not do it well. I don't know because I haven't tried that. So I think that's something that you have to consider as well. I mean, but you have to be aware that it's not a magic solution that is going to solve all. It's definitely better than going native if you have and low resources.
Yeah, I think most apps out there are really like, talking to APIs, things like that. So you're not really going to be too much into the native code. But yeah, I mean, we had some people on here who did say similar things. And I think what I heard before, which makes a lot of sense, is that if the plugin environment for Flutter is good, then Flutter's good. And if the environment is bad, then Flutter could also be bad. It's kind of like exponential pending like the environment for plugins.
Definitely.
You also think the same, right?
Conditioned to what's happening around. Like if the plugins you're using stop evolving, then it's not going to be as good anymore, right? But at the moment, it seems to be going in the right direction. So let's see. It's on green.
Have you actually created any plugins yourself?
No, I haven't had the opportunity or the need so far to do something like
that. Yes, I did actually. Well, I created two, both of them for clients specifically. One was actually integrating with native hardware for an Android robot. So they have their own SDK, and we just use a Kotlin. The other one was actually creating. We use Rust with Flutter actually to talk to the native system too. So the idea was like we wanted to build like a native app for Windows. So just when Windows support finally came out, I was tasked with building a Windows app for a company, and I said, why don't we just build with Flutter, because actually we're using Flutter for their mobile apps. I said, why don't we try Flutter? And then as a backup, I can write all of the logic in the DLL or the DIL files, they call them DLLs. And so that's what I did. I wrote some Rust code, which can compile to DIL for Windows. And also we did the same thing for Mac. We did like SOs or something like that. And used Flutter plugin to connect it, and then just added the Flutter plugin to the project. And yeah, everything was working great. They loved it. The nice part about Rust and Flutter is that they are very platform agnostic for the most part. And so I wrote everything on a Mac. It's kind of funny. I wrote everything on a Mac, and then I just pulled up a VM in virtual machine in VMware and just git cloned, compiled it, did the installer, installed it on a local machine I have over here, see if it worked. Worked basically out of the box, and just brought it to them. So I was kind of happy. It's kind of a really weird story where like we wrote everything on a Mac for a Windows machine, and that's kind of the power of Flutter, is that it just kind of worked. So it's kind of funny. Like I also see some people asking questions like, can I write like can I write apps for like Mac using a Windows? Can I write Windows apps on a Mac? And yeah, technically you kind of can, but it just depends. You wouldn't be able to actually test everything properly. So you have to hope that that plugin works, or hope that you know how to write. And yeah, but you can't export, right? That's the only thing. So, but yeah, that was a fun experience. But I've been actually pulling in plugins recently and actually upgrading and adding features to them more than creating my own plugins because, yeah, going back to the plugin universe, like there's some plugins which they're missing features that I really need, and also some of them are actually a little bit buggy, right? So the plugin's only as good as the developer who wrote it, and so like you find some issues and you have to submit patches and bring it back to them. I'm more than happy to share, right? Because you're not the only one who actually uses it.
All the time
What
the
do you mean?
developer has to write it. Yeah, no, I was just saying all the time to write it, but they don't okay to write in an open source plugin and it works and they just put it out there. We use it, fantastic, but it's not like I don't know, it's not the best they could create, right? I mean, it's cool that there are lots of plugins there already, and I think it's cool to also participate and help people make them evolve. And actually, up using Unity, we're going to talk about with Flutter, was because of an open source plugin that is out there. So yeah, it definitely helps a lot to have this kind of like input, right, from the community, from many different people who, like you, have ideas and just put projects and plugins out there. So, as you said, if the community is strong, if there are enough and enough ways to integrate Flutter with the platforms, then this will keep on going. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But the other thing too is like, let's also not forget like this plugin worked for them, right? It solves their problem, and they just happen to share it with us. Your problem may not fit their problem exactly, and also let's not forget too that they're sharing this like, and you're not paying them, right? You're not supporting them, and so don't get too upset if it's not working to your side, right? Try to help, or at least the best you that I think the best thing that you can do is just report the issue, and then see if they will help to fix it for you. If not, if you can try to fix it yourself and submit it and help others, right? So what I have to try to explain this to some of my clients is like, yeah, we use this open source plugin, but it's broken, and they get all upset. I'm like, you need to relax. Like, software is not free. Like, you're paying me for software, so you're also not paying them. Like, so, and I'm not paying them either. So you need to like step back and think about, we're using an okay base, and we can help to make it better, right? So just don't expect everything to work out of the box right away. Like, it's just life.
Yeah, it's tricky like to make decisions when you are going to choose different plugins because you have to see the support behind it, and depending on the project, you need to decide if you want to take the risk of using A or B. And definitely an aspect to consider for sure, because you don't really know what's going to happen in the future with the plugins. They're going to keep on being maintained, or probably not, and you're going to have to take responsibility and act. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of doing some research and seeing which plugins tend to have more support, like the ones supported by the community, and just you're going to create requires certainty in that area, right? And so, but there is nothing that is 100% bulletproof. That's why you need to do testing. Do you do testing? Test. Testing.
Sarah, I think I lost you towards the end. You said you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you have met people who have a testing approach for Flutter. Like there are some. I doing also a consistent or clear approach for.
Yes, I actually do write tests. I do see that you do use block, and so what I usually do is I usually test my block, make sure that certain events have certain outputs. Um, I have done like TDD testing with Riverside and Riverpod,
Same.
so that was a lot of fun too. Yeah. Um, Let me think. There we have a guest who actually came on twice already, called Alexander Minette. He Wow, this guy is he does everything as automated as possible. He does all like he does like golden test, which is like the PNG testing with the screen sizes, everything. And he does unit testing, view testing, all kinds of testing. He does basically everything. And he actually, I think we just did an episode with him last week or so, where he went through all of his testing, and you should definitely check out that episode and see how he does. Definitely watch the video because he kind of goes through how he tests everything.
Cool, cool, cool. That sounds cool. Yeah, I think that's a good subject. It's a good topic because Flutter is like a good first step, even if you're learning how to code and you want to create something like or. But then the next level, you need to have ways to approach things like state management and testing and things like that, right? So I think those subjects are interesting as well because they help software evolve in the right direction.
One of the things I find quite difficult for like beginners is like this whole entire null safety thing. And we're talking about like plugins, right? I've seen quite a few like beginners who kind of come into the community and they get hung up on using plugins. And the two things they get hung up on is one is like the support for different platforms, right? So there's some plugins which only support like, like iOS, Android, or even desktop, but they don't support web. And it could be because technical, or it could be because the guy just didn't write it. That's something I've seen happen quite a few times, and people are saying, "How can I fix this?" And I'm sorry, but if it doesn't support the platform, there's not much you can do. That's kind of one of the bad things about Flutter. The other thing too is now with kind of the forced null safety starting in Android, or sorry, starting in Flutter 2.2, which is the more recent one. Yeah, you're going to run into null safety issues, and if you try to bring in a plugin which doesn't have null safety, it's just not going to work out, right? And so I've seen quite a few people getting frustrated with this, and I feel bad that they're kind of coming in at this time, and it's like, okay, I heard Flutter's cool, I heard it works, I'm watching these old tutorial videos. What are all these things? Why do I have to add question marks? Like, what is final? What is, all these things? And then why is this plugin not working? I saw it could work, but it's like a no safe issue or the platform issue. Like those things are really downers, I think, for the beginners in the community.
Yeah, a moment in which things are changing, right? So hopefully people are going to start migrating their projects, their plugins, and things are going to be easier for everybody else. But yeah, I completely agree. Like I've met people who wanted to migrate their project, but they couldn't. They were using did not support null safety yet. So yeah, just have to wait. I think it's going to happen though. The Flutter community is really dynamic. Things happen so fast and change all the time. So like we were talking about Flutter, and I started working with Flutter in that year, and now 2 years have passed. And right, we were like talking about the beginning of our Flutter journey, I think, and now you've done and it's just super dynamic. Like so many different packages have been created, and it's moving super fast. I think it's going to happen. I think people are going to start like upgrading their plugins and will. If you have plugins or if you want to help, yeah, it'll be cool, right?
Yeah, I did see quite a few people kind of taking up storm saying, "Hey, we want null safety, and can you do it?" And the guy will say, "I'm too busy," and he'll say, "Okay, we'll do it for you." Right? That's kind of the nice part about the Flutter community. People are not kind of like flaming each other, saying, "You got to update this plugin, or I'll kill you." You don't get this kind of community, so that's the good part, right? Is I see a majority of people saying, "We're here to help." Like, if you can't do it, we'll definitely submit the PR for you. So I'm happy to see that. I feel like we're talking about so many things, but I don't want to skip on the main topic, right? So sorry about that. The thing we brought you on for, and again, I'll reiterate, is like how to use Unity and Flutter, right? So what was like the discussions, right? I think maybe you can talk about like, what was the project, because your project is actually quite featured by Flutter, the Flutter team, right? So please go ahead.
Okay, so I can tell you a little bit about working project. So first, I joined when they had already created the application. Existed, it needed some additional development in order for it to be released. So I was not there. Was made to use Flutter and Unity, but I could see it evolve, be released, and it's being featured. So interesting experience. As I was saying before, it was thanks to open source plugin that the team were able to use Flutter and connect it. And when we were featured, the person who created the plugin was there. So, and he worked with us. Like, we contacted him. People in my team contacted him. Because as you said, like sometimes those people might not have enough time to be able to make certain changes that are important for your. So they contacted him and they started working together, and there were some changes that were made, and it was a very collaborative environment. The application worked as expected. So we had two teams. A team of and a team of software engineers. The software engineers were working with the Flutter project, and the game developer a Unity aspect of the application. And I think at some point you were asking me, like, choosing Flutter and Unity, why not just Unity, right? I think one of the reasons behind that was that wanted to get the best of both worlds, right? Because Unity is optimized for UIs, and then Flutter is optimized for Unity for game development and AR experiences, which is what they were doing, or what we were doing. So it made because it was we thought it was, or they thought, I guess, when they made the decision, that it was a good idea to combine both. And so it was not a super straightforward process, that's for sure, but it worked, and it's already out there.
Okay. So that's pretty interesting. The connection between you and I is really not very good, so I only caught bits and pieces of it, but sounds really interesting. It makes a lot of sense, right? Use what's each one's like really good at, right? I heard you said Flutter is great for making mobile apps. Unity is great for making apps, or making games. So it makes the most sense to combine the two best tools together to have the best product available. Yeah, like I think one thing I couldn't figure out is, like, I know with Unity you can just export directly to like the phone, right? So like, why even bother to do that? Because there's not many things, I think, in a game like this that needs to be Flutter, right? You could just directly just use Unity to create everything you need. No.
Okay. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. The thing is that the project we worked on, or I think I know where you're coming from, is not a game per se. It is a storytelling experience. So the platform has a very big role, the very important role, right? It's the driver. The UI elements, the AR elements are like of the Flutter application. So the Flutter application is like the driver. So it's like newsfeed, let's say, because we have something similar to a newsfeed where you are where you find different types of media. It's not just it's a complicated narrative, interesting way to tell a story, and AR is part of it, probably one of the most important part of it. But it's not just a game, right? So it's an innovative idea, and the reasons why it's a bit difficult to communicate, right? When you say Unity, everybody goes and thinks, oh, yeah. But it was not the case for this particular project. So because the application part of had a very high importance, then it makes sense to use something that applications particularly, right? Like you can have things like lazy instantiation, right? And then that helps you a lot to create applications when you're working with Flutter. You have all those components that and so it's created specifically for that, right? So that's why, because it was not that was in AR and Unity, but it had a lot of other components that needed an interface, and so we needed a very
Okay, I see. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, but I guess if you're going to use a straight game, right, then maybe it wouldn't make sense to mix the two, right? That's a little bit too. I think it's a little bit too much.
Yeah, definitely. Like everything in technology, you have to exactly like anything in technology, you have to think you want to create, where you want to get, and which tools are the best for you to get there, right? There is no magic solution for all problems. So the abilities you have around and the resources you have, right?
So how did Google actually get to hear about your project, right? How did you guys like come out and say, hey, we use Flutter and Unity, right? That's kind of the interesting part.
That's a really good question, and I don't really know the question. Like I just remember one day I was contacted by somebody in the company, and they said, "Hey, Google application, do you want to help putting together some info for that?" And then I volunteered and helped, but I don't really know how it happened. I guess it was thanks to our marketing and PR department, and yeah, but I don't.
Pieces of the app did you actually work on yourself?
When I joined, there were animations that needed. Was the majority of my time creating animations. But I had to customize animations for that Flutter gives you out of the box, let's say, to make them more specific because it's an important design studio here in the UK, and they have a particular animation style that I wanted the application reflect. So the way the movements happen when you click a button, the way elements, screens showed up when you were navigating, all those things needed to be animated in, right? So I help a lot doing those aspects of the app, writing animations, creating the called Lottie, where you can create animations and then import them in Flutter. And then we did things like that as well, because we had animators creating graphics, and so we can import them in Flutter and organize the application so we could show those animations in the right moment. Yeah. The job. And then I also did a little bit of like blog, because that application I was working in, it was mainly Redux. So it was almost all Redux, and then there were some small little tweaks, like when you want to create an interface to play audio, for example, you need and you need certain animations and things to happen around that. So I created a block component to be able to part of the app. And that's when I started working with Block, and that's what I use now.
Okay, so you actually use Block within this project. That's quite interesting. I heard less and less people using Block, but it's not too many people. Usually people use RiverPod. But yeah, I do hear some people using Block, right? So was that your first time ever using Block?
Yeah, that was my first time using Block when I was in that project. And now I use Block. I use Block now for like the project. I like how I can test the different components. And I think it's also because I'm more familiar. What happens when you do software development, right? You find something that works, and then you become familiar with it. And then in order for you to change to another, evaluate the benefits, right? Because you're going to invest time learning the new approach for sure. And if they then you can move towards that direction. So it's always changing. So I don't know for how long I'm going to be working with Block, but at the moment that's what I'm doing.
Cool. I think yeah, I have a really good idea about why and how you guys work with Unity, and it seems like it makes sense for you guys. So I think anybody else who's thinking about doing this, hearing this podcast and hearing your thoughts and your experience will definitely give them an idea if they should go in that route or not, right? Is there anything else you want to say about your time working with Flutter and Unity together?
I think it is important to be able to create processes that work for everybody. Because when you're working with two different technologies, very different technologies like Flutter and Unity, and people who are specialized, you have a big gap, a communication gap, right? So it's important to be able to find a way to those two worlds from many different perspectives, right? Like if you are successful, then you're going to be able to create a good, but if you cannot do it, then it's going to be complicated. So game development and software development are two completely different worlds, even though they have things in common. So it's of the challenge to be able to create something together in that environment. So if somebody wants to do that, that's also something they have to consider.
Okay, that's a good tip. Yeah, if nothing else, I think we could start to wrap up over here. So a couple of questions I have for you is, I think like if somebody's new to Flutter, right? Do you think that the state of education in Flutter right now is good? Like looking at all the books, tutorials, things like that. Do you think that there's enough material out there for them to really get started and get into it?
I think so, definitely. At the end of the project, my last project, the one we were just talking about, with the Unity side, and it was really hard for me because I could not find enough resources. I'm sure that people who are Unity experts probably, but because Flutter world, at that time I was working in Unity for like, I don't know, a month or something. Very clear to me to see the difference. Like you have so many resources in Flutter, and there are lots of very good tutorials. There is information everywhere. You Google things and you find the answer. Ask people. You can get in touch with the people who are. So I think it's definitely there is enough information out there for anybody to start if they really want to, and it's easier from my personal experience, which is limited, and probably people might not agree. But in terms of information, a lot easier for me to get into Flutter than it was to get into Unity when I was trying to learn a bit of Unity.
My final question is like, do you have any like tips or warnings for people who are beginning to actually use Flutter?
I think it's right. Like Flutter is a good tool, but you have to evaluate if it's good for your particular use case, right? In case you need to use lots of platform-specific code, because if you are learning how to code and you're not familiar with mobile, that might be like a barrier for you. So consider those aspects and then go for it, because there is a lot of information out there, as we said, right?
I think the big thing for me is like people really need to take some time to wrap their mind around asynchronous programming, right? Streams and futures. Those are probably some of the trickiest concepts within Flutter because most other programming languages are very synchronous, right? That's the big tip and thing that kind of stands up in my mind.
I think promises in JavaScript is similar, right?
Definitely similar,
I think
right?
promises
But
in
you still
JavaScript
need
work in a similar
to,
way, right?
yeah, you still need to take the time to learn about
Yeah.
those. Not everybody, like if it's your first language, then you're not going to go to JavaScript and learn about promises.
Oh, sure. If it's your first, pay attention to asynchronous programming for sure, and you also have to what Flutter actually is, in the sense that yes, it's a tool that helps you create beautiful and performant UIs, but you can application Flutter and do all the logic you need if it's a small app, right? You have to wrap your head around limitations and the possibilities of a tool like this one.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Do you have anything else you wanted to mention or talk about before we sign off?
No, I think that's it. Nice to see you again.
I hope we can open up the border between, the Europe and Asia very soon. So I would love to go to Europe someday. I still haven't been yet. So, and I would love to have you back on and talk more about your startup, right? Because we didn't give you a lot of time to talk about that. It'd be good to hear kind of what you're working on.
To Hong Kong.
So, otherwise, yeah, only part time, but it sounds very interesting, right? So I would love to get you back on. Otherwise, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and let's have you back soon.
Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.